to Israel. My wife and I went to Israel.
Hi, welcome to Contempo. I am your host, Roberta Markbreit. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing with us. And please help me welcome our very, very special guest, author Kenneth Green.
Thank
welcome.
you, Roberta. Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we're thrilled you're here. I want to show Kenneth's recent book. If you can zoom in on this, it would be great. I'm from Division Street. You are from Division Street, and you have a wonderful, wonderful, it's in your heart and soul. In the book, you say, Division Street shaped my life. Everything that I am is because of my experiences on Division Street. And then you speak about your father, and of course, he was your wonderful, my father played a monumental role in my life. Well, let's explore that.
Well, Roberta, I'll tell you what prompted me to write the book. After my mother died, I was looking through her belongings, scrapbooks, memorabilia, old newspaper articles, and I was stunned to find out how many famous Jewish men lived on my street, Division Street. Barney Ross, the great boxer, Benny Goodman, the musician, Saul Bellow, Studs Terkel, Pulitzer Prize-winning authors, Ben Heck, the great director, Carl Forman, the producer, Jules Stein, who established the Jules Stein Eye Clinic at UCLA, Michael Todd, who was married to Elizabeth Taylor, Jackie Leonard, the famous comedian. The list goes on, and I was stunned. And I thought to myself, I'm going to write a book, and I want to pay tribute to these great people. Not only that, but I grew up with people who came from very humble beginnings. Some of them came from even extreme poverty. Every one of them, Roberta, became extremely successful. And so I told my wife, I said, you know, I want to write a book. I lived in a magical neighborhood, and I want to write a book, and I want to pay tribute to the great people that came before me and the great men that I grew up with. And there was still another reason that I wanted to write the book. It was my hope that I can inspire young children who lack self-esteem because I was thrown out of high school. That was a terrible, terrible thing to happen to my parents. But what happened to me, Roberta, is I lived in Humboldt Park. I attended Roosevelt High School, and I had a permit. I hated school. I don't know why, because my parents stressed education. But every Monday and every Friday was a holiday for me. I wouldn't go. I kept playing hooky. And finally it caught up to me. And the principal called me in the office, and he said, the party is over, you're out. I was, of course, humiliated. And so my permit was revoked, and I had to go to Thule High School, which is now Roberto Clemente. It was a very rough school, and I was very depressed. And after about one semester, I called my principal at Roosevelt High School, and I said, please take me back. I'll be good. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do for you. He was a dear man, Mr. O'Brien. He said, if you can maintain a B average, if you can stop playing hooky, no tardies, I'll take you back.
What a beautiful thing.
Beautiful thing. So I had a second chance. He took me back. The problem was my grades were so bad, Roberta, that out of 187 students, I was 186 when I graduated.
And there was somebody behind
One
you.
guy even worse than me, my buddy Ginsberg. So,
well, you write your book with heart and love. And let's, now that we're on the subject about your student experience, you write with such humor. One time your sister, who lives in California, was buying cosmetics at a counter, and she asked you, they talked about growing up in Chicago, and your sister asked the sales lady, do you know my brother Kenneth Green? And this is what she said. I knew a Kenny Green, but he would definitely not be a lawyer. He would be dead from the electric chair. Now that's pretty strong.
Yeah, well, she told me that, and I got the woman's name, and I called her. She was my friend, Lenore. Well, so what happened to me is I finally graduated from Roosevelt after they took me back, but it took me 4.5 years. After I graduated, I thought, I'm done. I'll never go to college. My grades were miserable, so my best friend said to me, we're never going to go to college. Let's join the Army. I said, okay. So we went in on the buddy system, and that lasted only through basic training. He went to Texas, and the poor guy got out on a psychiatric discharge in a few months. A few months later, he was schizophrenic. In those days, they didn't know much about it. I went to Korea. I was in Korea, Roberta, for 16 and a half months. I came home, and I'll never forget what happened. My father was an immigrant from Poland. He spoke broken English. He loved me very much. In fact, he lived through me. He waited about a week. He took me in the bedroom. He closed the door. He spoke to me in Yiddish. The words were, Mein Sohn, was will der tun mit dein Leben? It means, my son, what will you do with your life? I said, Dad, I want to do what you do. I want to be a house painter. And he looked at me and he said, no, you're going to do better than that. You be a lawyer. I said, Dad, I can't be a lawyer. I got thrown out of high school. I never read a book to completion. And he said, well, you're a smart kid, and you could be president, and you can do it. And I said, no, Dad, I really want to be a painter. He said, okay, Boychik, you start tomorrow. Well, Roberta, he was a smart guy. He had me painting closets in the projects. And on the third day, I came home, and I was covered with paint. I had more paint on my face in the closet. And I said, Dad, guess what? Your only son is going to be a lawyer.
How wonderful. But what an inspiration. He was a very intelligent man.
He was.
He had such an influence on you. And you are an inspiration. You've been speaking, really, all over Chicago for many years. Now, this morning, where did you speak?
This morning, I spoke at the Lincolnwood Library. But even more important was yesterday, I spoke at Roosevelt High School.
Oh, what a homecoming.
Yeah, the very school that I was thrown out of, Roberta, as I drove up Kimball Avenue, on the marquee, it said, Ken Green, author, is here. So, of course, that brought tears to my eyes.
Of course.
And I spoke to the children, and but before I get to that, so I'll tell you what happened. I had to come up with a plan. I told my father I'm going to be a lawyer, but we were poor. And I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to become a lawyer when we have no money? I have to go to college for 4 years. I have to go to law school 4 years at night. And I said, Dad, how am I going to do this? I said, first of all, it's going to take me 8 years. And his words were, 8 years will come and 8 years will pass. Some guys will be kicking back, drinking beer, watching TV. If you do what I tell you to do, your relatives who don't think much, I had some relatives who didn't think I could do much with my life. He said, they're going to be sitting in the office waiting to see you, and you tell the secretary, Mr. Green is busy, you have to make an appointment.
I love it.
He had a good sense of humor. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. So I had to come up with a plan, and the plan was this. I have to work hard. I got a job as a cab driver, and I had a second job selling cash registers, and I went to Roosevelt University part-time. It was very difficult. I ended up having a roommate. We lived on Kenmore Street. I paid $50 a month rent. The bed came out of the wall. Didn't even have a kitchen. We had a hot plate, cockroaches on the floor, but I persevered. I never quit. And finally, I got my bachelor's degree. By then, I was living in Los Angeles. My family moved here. And I got my bachelor's degree, and I became a high school teacher in Los Angeles.
What did you teach?
History.
You taught history.
And I got all the credentials, so I could teach any grade, including junior college. And then I started law school. It was very difficult. I taught high school during the day. I went to law school at night. I used to sleep about 3-4 hours a night, but finally I made it. Once I became a lawyer, my father-in-law at that time was a very famous lawyer in Los Angeles.